What happens when Donald Trump tries to humiliate Barack Obama in front of the world, only for Obama to answer with one sentence so sharp it silences the room and rewrites the headlines? The press room in Washington was already thick with tension before anyone said a word. Reporters were crowded shoulder to shoulder, pens tapping nervously on notepads, cameras poised, microphones extended like hungry mouths waiting to catch the next sound bite. Everyone knew the atmosphere could shift in a heartbeat. It often did when President Trump was behind the podium. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as though he had spotted his target. Then came the jab. Barack Obama, he did nothing but talk. 8 years of speeches, 0 results. That's the truth. The words dropped like a stone in a still pond. Gasps rippled through the room. Quick whispers broke out between reporters. A few raised their eyebrows. Others smirked, as if waiting for the drama that always seemed to follow. The cameras zoomed in tighter, catching every twitch, every glance. But here's the thing. Barack Obama was in the room. He hadn't come for a fight. He was there for a bipartisan event on education, sitting quietly to the side. His posture was as steady as ever. He had been listening, not seeking attention. For many, his presence was symbolic, a reminder of a different time. For Trump, it was an opportunity to score a headline. A young reporter from St. Louis whispered into her recorder, "Trump takes aim at Obama." Another from Phoenix scribbled mockery in bold letters across his notes. The air shifted as people began to wonder, would Obama respond? Trump continued, his voice rising. The media loves him, but the truth, he left this country weak. He talked about hope, but hope doesn't pay the bills. We're stronger now than ever before. His hands slammed on the podium for emphasis. Some of the reporters nodded in rhythm, not in agreement, but in recognition. This was the Trump they had come to expect. Sharp, combative, unwilling to let go once he had found a target. Across the room, Obama adjusted his tie ever so slightly. It was the smallest movement, but it caught eyes. A CNN camera zoomed in. His lips were pressed together in a straight line. He looked calm, almost too calm, like someone who had been here before and already knew the ending. A veteran journalist from Dallas whispered to her colleague, "If he says something, it's going to be big." The crowd knew what Trump was doing. He thrived on confrontation, on turning the spotlight into a weapon. And yet, here was the former president, composed, patient, his silence louder than any word spoken so far. For a brief second, there was a sense that the room itself was holding its breath. The contrast couldn't be sharper. One man, animated, gesturing, punctuating every sentence with fire, and the other, a still figure, deliberate, almost meditative. Trump pointed toward Obama's side of the room. There he is, Mr. Talker. All speeches, no action. People are tired of it. The words hung in the air, heavier this time. A few reporters turned to Obama, waiting. A Fox News journalist mouthed to a colleague, "Will he take it?" Obama finally moved. He didn't stand right away. Instead, he leaned forward, folded his hands, and glanced toward the podium. His eyes met Trump's for a fleeting moment, the kind of look that carried more weight than 1,000 words. Trump grinned, thinking he had control of the moment. "See? Silent. That's what I mean. No answers, no fight." The smirk spread across his face, a showman's confidence. But those who knew Obama, who had studied his rhythm and timing over the years, recognized something different. He wasn't silent because he had no answer. He was silent because he was choosing his moment. A reporter near the front row whispered, "This feels like one of those times." The camera stayed locked on Obama. His slow movements were intentional. He pushed his chair back, the scraping sound cutting through the chatter. He rose to his feet, tall and steady, his face unreadable. His presence alone shifted the energy, like the sound of thunder before a storm. The room leaned in. Even the photographers, usually immune to suspense after years of covering politics, tightened their grips on their cameras. Obama walked toward the microphone. Not rushed, not dragged out. but at a pace that said he was in no hurry to win anyone's approval. He adjusted the mic stand slightly lower, the metal screech echoing faintly in the packed room. He paused. Just that pause alone seemed to stretch for seconds longer than anyone expected. People glanced at each other, eyebrows raised. Silence in a room filled with noise has a way of demanding attention. Reporters whispered frantically, trying to predict what was coming. Trump leaned back slightly, arms crossed, smirk still in place, but his eyes flickered with something that almost looked like doubt. Obama scanned the room, not rushing, letting the weight of the moment do the work for him. When his lips finally parted, the entire room felt as though it tilted toward him. Every microphone, every camera, every heartbeat was waiting to catch his words. But before he spoke, something even more powerful happened. The room realized the balance of power had already shifted the moment Obama rose to his feet. The press hall transformed. 1,000 small sounds, pens scratching, fingers tapping keyboards, camera shutters clicking, seemed to collapse into one rhythm, all syncing to the measured steps of the former president as he approached the microphone. Trump stood at the podium, chin lifted, watching. His smirk stayed, but it didn't stretch as wide as before. For once, he wasn't the only performer in the spotlight. Obama placed both hands on the podium, fingers spread flat. He didn't speak yet. He just stood there, steady, shoulders squared, letting the silence build. The reporters could feel it. Even those who had covered dozens of fiery exchanges knew this was different. There was no shouting match, no interruption, only suspense, thick and electric. A journalist from Seattle leaned forward, whispering to the person beside her. "He's pulling the room in without a word." Trump leaned closer to his microphone. "What's it going to be, Barack? Another speech about hope? Another promise you couldn't keep?" His voice was sharp, but there was a nervous rhythm behind it, as if he was speaking faster than he meant to. Obama finally lifted his head and looked across the room. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he let his eyes sweep the rows of journalists, the cameras, the aides. It was the kind of look that carried gravity, the kind that made even those at home watching on television feel like he was speaking to them. When he did speak, his voice was low, steady, almost conversational. "This isn't about me. It's about the country we all share." That single line wasn't the sentence that would end up going viral, but it was the opening move, and everyone felt it. The tone was set. Trump chuckled into the mic, shaking his head. There he goes again. Country. This country that people are tired of speeches. They want results. A few murmurs echoed through the room. A younger journalist covering the White House for the first time wrote furiously in his notepad. Contrast between noise and calm. Obama didn't flinch. He shifted his weight, one hand still resting on the podium, the other gesturing slightly as if inviting the audience into the thought. Results come from vision. Without vision, power is just noise. The line stung, not because it was loud or flashy, but because it landed with a weight the room recognized instantly. Several heads turned to gauge Trump's reaction. His smirk faltered for the briefest second before returning in a thinner form. Trump responded quickly, leaning forward again. Vision? We're finally winning again. Look around. Markets are up. Jobs are back. People are proud to be Americans again. Obama tilted his head slightly, the way a professor might when a student made a point worth acknowledging. Pride isn't measured in numbers. Pride is measured in how we treat each other. That line drew a silent, sharp intake of breath. It wasn't that kind of setting for applause, but the shift in energy was undeniable. Some reporters glanced at each other knowingly. The clip was already writing itself for the evening broadcasts. For the next few minutes, it became a chess match in real time. Trump, with his quick, aggressive moves, meant to dominate. Obama, with his patience. Each response crafted, deliberate, landing not with force, but with weight. Trump, you left us divided. Obama, division doesn't start with the people, it starts with leaders. Trump, I rebuilt strength. Obama, Strength without wisdom becomes weakness in disguise. Each exchange felt like a tightening rope. The press scribbled, cameras whirred, the audience outside the room, millions watching from living rooms, break rooms, classrooms, could feel the rising pressure. In one corner of the room, a reporter whispered into his phone, live streaming to his editor. He's not raising his voice, but every sentence feels like a counterpunch. Trump's frustration began to show. His gestures grew sharper, his tone louder. But the more he pressed, the calmer Obama became. It was a mirror of contrast. Two men, two styles, two visions of leadership playing out live on television. Then something subtle happened. The reporters who had started the event scribbling down Trump's words now leaned forward with their pens following Obama. Their attention shifted without them realizing it. The headline was no longer about Trump's jab. It was about Obama's response. The room could sense where this was going. Something was building. Obama's rhythm was tightening, his pauses growing more deliberate. He was walking the audience closer to that one sentence everyone would remember. Trump noticed too. He interrupted, louder this time. "You had your chance, Barack. People remember you failed." Obama didn't break eye contact. He leaned slightly closer to the microphone, his voice measured. "Failure isn't when you fall. Failure is when you stop caring about who falls with you." The words landed hard. There was a collective intake of breath, not just from the reporters in the room, but from the millions watching at home. It was a warning shot, a taste of the bigger moment to come. Trump muttered something into his mic, trying to reclaim ground, but the energy had already shifted. The journalists scribbling weren't writing Trump's lines anymore. They were circling Obama's. The silence stretched again, not empty, but loaded. Obama stood steady, every pause intentional, letting the moment expand. It wasn't yet the knockout line, but you could feel it coming. Before that moment could arrive, however, the tension in the room had to climb even higher, and Trump was about to give him the opening he needed. Trump gripped the podium with both hands now, leaning forward, his voice louder and sharper than before. The jab had landed the way he wanted, but Obama's calm replies were beginning to shift the mood of the room. Trump sensed it, and if there was one thing he never allowed, it was losing control of the stage. "Don't be fooled," he barked, pointing at the crowd of journalists and then at Obama. This man had his time, and what did he leave behind? Broken promises. He left America weak. He left jobs overseas. He left the world laughing at us. That's the truth nobody here wants to say. The room filled with the clattering of keyboards. Some reporters were already writing headlines. Others stared at Obama to catch his reaction. Trump thrived on this. He could feel eyes on him, and for a moment he leaned into it. He raised his voice again. "You know what? He gave us talk. Just talk." He went around the country telling everyone what they wanted to hear. But when it came time to deliver, nothing, and you all know it. The attack was harsh, the kind of language that played well to his base. A reporter from Ohio whispered under her breath, "He's going all in." Obama stood a few feet away, motionless, his hands loosely folded in front of him. His expression didn't change. He didn't interrupt. That silence seemed to bother Trump even more, as though his words weren't cutting deep enough. Trump pushed harder. 8 years. 8 long years. He left us with division, with chaos, with people who stopped believing in their own country. And now he wants to stand here and pretend he's some kind of leader. The words echoed in the chamber, bouncing off the walls. Trump's supporters in the back nodded approvingly, a few even whispering encouragement. The camera zoomed in tighter, catching every flicker of expression on both men's faces. Obama finally shifted slightly, turning his head toward Trump, and gave the smallest of smiles. It wasn't arrogance. It was almost weary, as if he had heard this tune before. The subtle gesture caught the eye of nearly everyone in the room. Trump noticed too. "You think this is funny? You think America's a joke?" He raised his hand in mock imitation, mimicking Obama's calm demeanor. Cool guy, smooth talker, but cool doesn't fix problems. Cool doesn't keep people safe. Cool doesn't pay the bills. The press reacted with quiet gasps and murmurs. This wasn't just a jab anymore. It was a full-on barrage. Trump had taken the stage as though it were a rally, but this wasn't a rally. It was a bipartisan event filled with lawmakers, reporters, and cameras feeding live coverage across the nation. A journalist from Minneapolis whispered into her phone, "He's trying to bury Obama right here in real time." Trump wasn't finished. He turned slightly toward the cameras, speaking as if directly to the millions watching at home. "Barack Obama gave you words. I give you results. Don't forget that." The statement was bold, forceful, and rehearsed in its rhythm. It drew nods from his aides standing at the back. They knew that for his base, this was the kind of soundbite that would make the evening news. Obama still hadn't spoken again. He remained in place, breathing evenly, his posture unshaken. But his silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Those who had followed him closely over the years knew he was waiting for the perfect opening, one that Trump himself would eventually hand to him. The silence stretched, and Trump filled it with more words. "You left us behind, Barack. You left cities in ruins. You left small towns forgotten. You left people without hope. And now you want to stand here and act like the hero." That final word, hero, came out laced with contempt. Trump's voice rose to nearly a shout, filling the chamber. For a moment, it seemed like the energy of the room tilted fully his way. His words were sharp, his delivery fierce. To many watching, it looked like he was in control. But not everyone saw it that way. Some reporters began noticing the contrast between the two men. One was fighting with every ounce of force he could summon. The other was still, quiet, deliberate. And that contrast, though subtle, was beginning to speak louder than the words themselves. A veteran photographer from Detroit muttered to his colleague, "He's burning hot, but Obama's just waiting. You can tell." And indeed, that was the truth. Because the more Trump pressed, the more he revealed. His tone grew harsher, his words more cutting, but his composure grew thinner. Obama, by doing almost nothing, was already bending the balance of the moment. The press leaned forward. Something was coming. The tension wasn't in what Trump was saying anymore. It was in what Obama hadn't said yet. But before Obama could deliver his answer, Trump decided to push one insult too far. And that's when everything began to shift. The final insult lingered in the air, sharp and personal. Trump had leaned into the microphone, his words aimed like arrows. "You weren't just weak, Barack. You were the biggest mistake this country ever made." The room gasped. A few reporters dropped their pens for a second. Others exchanged glances, their eyes wide. Even for Trump, this was a line that cut deeper than usual. He grinned, satisfied, expecting Obama to either shrink back or lash out. But Obama didn't shrink, and he didn't lash out. He shifted his weight, adjusted the cuff of his suit jacket, and stepped forward. The sound of his shoes against the floor was faint, but in the silence that followed Trump's words, it echoed with a strange authority. The cameras moved with him, swinging on their mounts to capture the approach. Reporters sat straighter. The silence was unnerving, not because it was empty, but because it was filled with expectation. Obama reached the podium. He didn't rush. He didn't try to wrestle the microphone away. He simply placed his hand on it, tilted it slightly toward him, and looked out across the room. His gaze moved slowly, first across the journalists, then the aides, then the cameras, and finally, it landed on Trump for a few seconds. He didn't speak. He just held Trump's stare. The smirk on Trump's face twitched. His confidence was momentarily checked by the stillness of the man in front of him. Obama finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I think we all came here today for a different reason." The room seemed to exhale all at once. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to cut through the barrage of insults and redirect the focus. The contrast between the two men had never been clearer. Trump, fiery and loud. Obama, measured and unshaken. A reporter near the front row scribbled, "Contrast of leadership styles. silence versus noise. Trump scoffed, raising his hand as if to wave him off. Here we go. The lecture, folks. I've heard this 1,000 times. He's going to talk about unity. He's going to talk about hope. And none of it ever happened. Obama didn't flinch. He leaned slightly into the microphone, his tone unchanging. Hope isn't a policy. It's a direction. It's a compass. Without it, leaders wander. The line drew murmurs from the press. Not loud applause. This wasn't a rally, but the kind of reaction that told you people were already repeating it under their breath. It was the kind of phrase that could headline an article or play well on television. Trump's face tightened. There it is. Words. That's all you ever had. Nice words. People want action, not poetry. Obama turned slightly toward the cameras, not Trump. His expression calm. Words matter. They set the course. Without the right words, action is blind. The contrast was building like a slow storm. Every sentence Obama gave wasn't just a reply, it was a reflection of Trump's own energy, inverted. The louder Trump became, the quieter and steadier Obama grew. A journalist from Arizona whispered, "He's not even matching his tone, he's turning it against him." Trump slammed his hand on the podium again. "You failed this country, Barack. Admit it. Look the American people in the eye and admit it." Obama's eyes lifted toward the cameras, then back at Trump. His voice stayed soft, but the weight behind it carried through the room. "I don't see failure when I look at this country. I see people who never gave up, even when leaders did." That landed differently. The room reacted with a subtle shift. The words weren't aimed at Trump directly. They were aimed at the people watching, millions of them, across living rooms, classrooms, workplaces. People who might have felt overlooked or dismissed suddenly felt included. Trump laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You're good at this. I'll give you that. Smooth. But people are tired of smooth. They want real." Obama glanced at him briefly, then back at the room. "Real doesn't mean loud. Real means lasting." The press scribbled faster. The exchanges had turned into a rhythm. Insult, counter, insult, counter. But with each turn, Obama's presence grew stronger. Not because of volume, but because of weight. Reporters could feel it. The photographers could feel it. Even Trump's aides in the back, shifting uncomfortably, could feel it. Obama wasn't just answering insults. He was reframing the moment. He was reminding everyone of the power of composure. The tension in the room was reaching its peak. Everyone could sense it. The words had escalated. The insults had sharpened, and the contrast had become undeniable. Obama was no longer just defending himself. He was preparing to redefine the entire exchange with a single sentence. The camera zoomed in close, ready. Reporters leaned forward, pens hovering above paper. Millions at home were locked in, waiting. But before Obama delivered the line that would change everything, the room needed to reach absolute silence. And Trump, without knowing it, was about to hand him that silence. For a moment, Trump stood frozen at the podium. His last outburst had been loud enough to shake the microphones, but his voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. He had pushed the exchange to its breaking point, and in doing so, he had given the room exactly what it needed. Quiet. The hush was heavy, charged. Even the air conditioning seemed to fade into the background. Reporters barely breathed, their pens hovering over their notepads, waiting. Cameras zoomed in so close, you could see the crease above Obama's brow. Obama didn't rush. He straightened his posture, one hand resting lightly on the podium, the other hanging by his side. He glanced at Trump, not with anger, not with pity, but with something else entirely, a quiet, unshakable focus.